Welcome to Conversations Live. For more than a decade, we've brought you the best in books, entertainment, celebrity interviews, and current events. When the movers and shakers of the world have something to say to you, they say it to us first. Here's your host, Cyrus Webb.
And welcome back, everyone, to Conversations Live. I'm your host, Cyrus Webb. Glad you all could join us once again. But for our radio audience here in Mississippi at WYAD 94.1 FM and WYADonline.com, we're glad that you all could be with us. Also, tuning in to our friends at iHeartRadio and Amazon Music Podcast. We're glad you all could be with us as well. We're excited to welcome author David Allen Schlaefer to our program today. He's the author of the Far Northern Land Saga. We're going to talk to him not only about his own love of storytelling, but what it's been like for him to see the response to the two books in the series, as well as let you guys know how to stay connected with him as well. David, thank you so much for the time. Really appreciate it.
Absolutely. It's a pleasure to speak with you today, Cyrus.
So, David, I think that the question I want to ask you first is, what does this feel like? It's one thing for you to be able to come up with the ideas, right? But what has it been like for you to see the way that people are connecting to the series and the books?
Yeah, well, it's really rewarding and fulfilling, and especially because this was really a labor of love. As you know, I'm a foreign service officer, a diplomat, and I wound up writing this entire series over a very long period of time. I wrote the 3 books in the trilogy just chronologically. I didn't stop, and it was about 7 to almost 8 years that I worked on these. So now to see the trilogy coming out, to start to interact with fans in different ways, and to see people really beginning to enjoy it and to do what I hope they would do, which is to become interested in Finnish myth and Finnish folklore and fantasy based upon Finnish culture. It's a great experience. It's really exciting, and it does feel like the culmination of this epic journey that I've been on.
Amazing. It's funny you mentioned that about your background, David, because one of the things that I noticed when I was prepping for this is that, of course, one of your own, you're a fan of J.R.R. Tolkien, had an opportunity to interview actually his grandson, Simon Tolkien, in this program, talking about his own love of storytelling. Does it almost feel inevitable for you, even though you've gotten to be able to have this professional life where people know you in one area, did it almost seem inevitable that in some way you would be a storyteller?
I think so. When I was a little kid, I was already telling stories and writing from a very early age. I think I wrote my first fantasy story, fantasy book as I called it, probably when I was in about 4th or 5th grade, around that time period. So I think you're right about that. I knew at some point that I wanted to turn to something like this, and everything aligned with a period of several years that I had an opportunity to live in Finland, and it just all came together. And it's been a labor of love, a real passion of mine.
So you mentioned fantasy, so I want to ask you about that because it kind of goes right into, of course, the series. What was it about fantasy that kind of drew you to it?
Yeah, I think it's just my love of that genre. So I am a big J.R.R. Tolkien fan. I think I read The Hobbit for the first time when I was in about 4th grade. And that just started my love at fantasy at that point. Chronicles of Narnia, Lord of the Rings, Silmarillion, the entire legendarium of Tolkien, and a lot of other classic works as well. Works by people like Ursula K. Le Guin and the Earthsea series, and lots of other things that just informed my childhood and my young adulthood. And so I think at that point, just the love for that genre led me to read more and more, not just fantasy, but the underpinnings of fantasy. Because I think that, contemporary fantasy is obviously very connected to myth and to folklore. And I think myth and folklore really, those are things that were meant to be, as Jordan Peterson would say, maps of meaning. Those were stories that were meant to tell people how to live in their societies, what their identity was, what their role was, what their place was, what was good and evil, how do you recognize it, How do you deal with it, and how do you handle it? There was a purpose behind these stories. It wasn't just, fantastic and cool stories to tell around the fire, but it was a type of education, and a type of education that was very much culturally specific, right, in a certain time and in a certain place. And as I got older and I began to understand that and delve into that more and more, I think it was very natural for me to explore something like the Far Northern Land Saga. I do write in other genres. I do have another book right now that's a little bit more of a dystopic sci-fi book that will be coming out perhaps in a couple of years. And I've written some other things in different genres, but certainly I think fantasy is my primary love, and it's something that I have just been immersed in my whole life.
Yeah, and now, of course, we're able to enjoy that, David. I want to say for those who are just tuning in, either on the radio side or online, you're listening to Conversations Live. We're excited to welcome author David Allen Schlaefer to our program today. We're talking to him not only about his own love of storytelling, but also the Far Northern Land Saga. So one thing I noticed from the very beginning, and again, I want to thank our mutual friend, Clint Morris of October Coast, for connecting us, David. I'm a big reader myself. When I went over to Amazon, the thing I thought about was, wow, you're able to take your own love of not only imagination but also language, mythology, and kind of put them together in this series. I mean, how much fun was that for you to take your own love of being able to go to faraway places and kind of bring that to the reader in your books?
Yeah, it was really exciting, and I think you're absolutely right about that. Regardless of the genre that you're writing in, regardless of what the story is, your own experiences that you have had, the feelings and the emotions, hopefully the wisdom and the lessons learned, all of that is going to inform what you're writing. It's going to find its way into the story somehow. I certainly think in my case, being a diplomat and being a foreign service officer, having lived in so many different countries and cultures, and experienced that, having studied so many different languages. And, language is such a window into culture. Even if you don't wind up becoming fluent in the language, simply the effort of developing some capability and studying it gives you a tremendous insight, I think, into the culture in question. I think all of that can be found in my writing and in the Far Northern Land Saga, specifically about Finland, but not limited to it. And I can give you a good example. There's both in the first book, The Mark of the Bear Clan, and also in the second book that has just come out, The Heir of Lemminkainen. There's a lot of situations that are analogous to what we would call refugee situations today. Situations where people have lost everything. Their homes have been destroyed, their villages have been destroyed, their lands have been destroyed, and they find themselves unexpectedly and on very short notice just set adrift, and leaving and fleeing and having to make these incredibly difficult decisions about, what to take and who to take and where to go, and to do that instantaneously without any forethought. And in my career, I've had the opportunity, unfortunately, let's say, to be in several situations like that where I have been working with and interacting with different populations and groups of people who were refugees, who were fleeing danger. I've done that in Southeast Asia, along the Burma-Thai border, with highland tribes. I've done that most recently, just a few weeks ago, in Ukraine, along the Polish-Ukrainian border, where I was working with tens of thousands of people that were fleeing that terrible situation. Experiences like that, conversations that I had with those individuals, being a part of that, the things that I saw, the things that I experienced, that is very much in these books, even though the setting is, 800 or 900 AD, Iron Age Finland. These contemporary experiences that I had dealing with these same issues definitely, I think, allowed me, I hope, to write some scenes, to write some vignettes, to capture a little bit about what people who are going through that see and feel and think and experience.
You mentioned earlier about the good and evil, David, but even in the newest book, one of the things that comes up is about choices, right? I mean, you have a choice of seeking retribution. You have the choice of deciding that you're going to take the better path, or what may be seen as the right path. What was that like for you to bring those real world decisions into a work of fantasy like this?
Yeah, that's definitely one of the themes that I wanted to weave into the books, and I think it's a big part of my own philosophy, my own worldview, let's say. I do very much believe that we are all moral agents. I don't believe that we are automatons. I don't believe that we are just reacting to, chemical stimuli. I think we have voice. I think we have agency. I think the choices that we make in our lives matter. And I wanted to bring an element of that into these stories and into the main characters. I mean, I think it's something that quite a few other, fantasy works, but, obviously many works in general explore. You can call it choice. I think you can also look at it as this concept of having the strength of your convictions. And having some type of a coherent philosophy or worldview or set of values. They may be very basic, but something that, determines what your moral choices are going to be, and being able to keep to those choices and to hold those values when times are tough and when times are difficult. It's very easy to espouse, a very grand moral philosophy and be on the side of good when times are good. And when there is no cost to being true to yourself. It's a lot more difficult when times are bad. And when you are thrown in extremis into, life-threatening situations, I think that is where people really have challenges and where their character is really tested. And I think my main characters and many of the supporting characters as well, that is something that I wanted to weave throughout the books. Choices that are made in times of stress, in times of danger, and how people react to that and how difficult it is, again, to stay true to yourself and to stay true to your values.
Let me ask you this. It seems like in hearing you describe this, David, that this really success in this for you personally, and you can correct me on this, was just your being able to do it. I mean, how did you kind of gauge success of this chapter, so to speak, of your life and the response to the series?
Yeah, as I mentioned, it was definitely a long haul. But it was something that I just really dedicated myself to. I really hoped that I would be able to capture in my series at least a little bit of this beautiful, melancholy spirit of Finland, of Finnish nature, of its attendant myths and legends. And I really hoped that my work would spark an interest in the English-speaking world, in Finland and in Finnish legend. And I think that's what kept me going. I think that is what inspired me throughout the writing process, both creatively, but also in terms of, let's say having the fortitude to use that word to keep going over such a long period of time, and then to see it come to fruition, which again is just a really neat thing. It's a really cool thing.
Yeah. And now people can be able to enjoy it. Again, everyone, David Allen Schlaefer has been our guest. We've been talking with him not only about his literary journey, but also what it's been like for him to be able to share now with the world. The Far Northern Land Saga Book 2 is out now. Of course, you can get both books through our friends at Amazon.com. For those joining us online, you will notice a link for Amazon there to take you directly to his author page there on Amazon. David, how else can our audience stay connected with you?
Right, absolutely. So my website is www.davidschlaefer.com, and there are selections from the book. The maps are on the website, which were made by a well-known fantasy cartographer, 2 beautiful maps, and there will be links on the site. And you can also go to my Facebook page. That is the Far Northern Land page, and there's a lot of neat stuff on that page as well.
Right. Well, David, congratulations to you again. Thank you so much for dropping by the show today. We really appreciate it, and looking forward to speaking with you again.
Sounds great. Thanks so much, Cyrus.
And more than welcome. And we thank your audience for tuning in to another great segment of Conversations Live. Until next time, I'm your host, Cyrus Webb, saying as always, enjoy your day, enjoy your life, enjoy your world. Thank you all for choosing Conversations Live. Now let's go make today amazing. Take care.